Okay, so now we're running and ramping up to the time that you see Big T once again at the 10-year high school reunion. So Big T is my father. And walk us through how that happened.
Well, at our 10-year reunion, I was divorced and had been for a few years. I was still teaching at the college, and Tom and I graduated from Kearney High the same year, so he was in my class. And, you know, we weren't really, I mean, we knew each other. We were acquaintances in high school, but he was kind of a big, quiet guy, you know, and I was
Which he still is.
He is. And although you wouldn't know it in the car ride up here because he had all kinds of ideas,
Yes,
you know,
he
for
actually
what I
did.
needed to say. Yeah.
He said he did say that Jules should be wearing a wig, smoking
red
a cigar,
wig, smoking a cigar, wearing a bikini,
bathing suit. Yeah, wearing a bathing
yeah.
suit. He had all kinds of great podcast ideas. So.
And cowboy boots.
Oh, yes. Red cowboy boots.
Right. Which is why maybe he's not here. Yeah. But anyway, you know, I knew him. He knew me. And really, we didn't connect that much. We may have said hello to each other at the reunion. We had a great time. I remember dancing with, you know, friends that had come in from California and Minnesota. And, you know, we were having a high old time. And that was in August or September. Well, I had just gotten to the point in my life where I thought, you know, if I'm single the rest of my life, I'll be okay. I'll be fine. You know, I have a job teaching. I enjoy it. And that was another thing I was going to mention was in that process where I changed my mind from being a chemist to a teacher. Yeah. I thought about how much better it was for the kids because I could be home with them in the summer at least part of the time, and we'd have our vacations together, you know, and stuff like that. So that
teaching was a good lifestyle.
It was,
especially as a single mom.
Right,
for sure.
And that was the point. Yeah. And then in February-ish, or the first week in March, I actually have it in my notes of when he thinks he called me.
Oh, funny.
Yes. On my phone. And I think it was the first week in March, I get this phone call from Tom Larson. And what had happened was in that, what would it have been, 6 months between the reunion and him calling me, he was, you know, how Dad, he thinks about things.
And brews and overthinks.
Right, everything. He was considering whether he wanted to take a risk in dating a divorcee and someone who had children from a previous marriage. And for whatever reason, he figured I was worth the risk.
Yes.
So he calls me, we go to dinner, and, you know, he was the perfect gentleman and showed up in this new car.
A fancy new ride.
Fancy new car. Yeah. Toronado, beautiful thing. And, you know, I had dated men, of course, and was actually engaged to one. But a lot of them were students or, you know, just getting started. And I made more money than they did.
Yeah, you were young. You were in your 20s.
And you know, I'd never gone out with someone who was stable and established. And he was stable and established. He's a farmer. And we just hit it off. And, you know, he's quiet and he's thoughtful. And we just enjoyed each other. And we dated for 3 years. But he knew it would take time to get the older girls used to him and him used to them.
him used to them also because a 28-year-old who had never been married or had kids or anything and
never really been around them either.
I was going to say, this is also in the 80s, which, and even now, a lot of men have not been around kids until they have their own.
Right.
If they are in certain industries, and family structures. So he hadn't had a lot of experience with kids, of course. No. Yeah.
And
so coming into you having at the time probably like a 10 or 11-year-old and then like a 5.
Right. Yeah. And that's what it was.
Yeah.
Lizzie was around 11. Stace was around 5-ish.
5, 6. Yeah.
And yeah. So we knew we were going to get married. Do you want me to tell about?
Yeah.
Yeah. But not everyone in the family was happy about that, because his dear mother taught at the college. She was very highly educated, very
also
bright
she
woman.
she had her master's and was working on her PhD in the 60s.
And she was the only female department chair head there. And she
for
was,
my audience, do you see some parallels between the trailblazer that my grandmother was and the trailblazer that my mom was, even though my grandmother did not approve of my mother?
Right off the bat. So, we actually even kind of had things planned. The wedding, it was just a family marriage, things. And we were still trying to talk her into it.
And what did she not care for about this choice in you?
Well, here's what had happened. In the daycare that she ran and started at the college, she had children in it that came from what were considered broken households with single parents. And the children had issues. They had
behavioral issues,
mental
issues.
Whatever, all kinds of issues. And she was afraid he was getting himself into a mess.
Yeah.
And she just may not have liked me very well either, because it's easy to see how some in the older generation thought I was kind of slutty. And so, get pregnant at 17, sure.
Yeah.
That wasn't her idea of a daughter-in-law,
right?
I'm sure. And so,
it's so funny. It is so funny to hear that because I have always seen you as such a conservative, modest person. I grew up in an extremely modest home. Yes. Extremely. First of all, my mom is not super girly, as you could probably imagine through the course of this story.
I'm wearing pants.
Right, yeah. But also, she never wore a lot of makeup. She never really did her hair. I distinctly remember when she cut her hair. She had this long, beautiful hair. She cut her hair, and I saw her, and I started crying.
Yes.
I was so upset.
And my mother were bawling about me cutting my hair.
Yes, I was so upset she cut her hair. And I was a child, but so, unreasonable. But you've never gotten your nails done. You don't get your hair, you don't wear a lot of makeup.
Foo-foo.
Yeah, you're not. You're not a girly girl.
Yeah.
And also in that, I mean, that goes along with the practicality of who you are, certainly. But you were always very modest. Very modest.
Tried to be.
Yeah.
Well,
so the version I saw of this woman, it's very funny and ironic to hear that anyone else could perceive you any differently,
But, that's what happens when you're judging from afar, and not really. Well, so praise God, my future brother-in-law goes in and sits down, Theo, with her and says, look, he's going to marry this woman. And if you are going to remove yourself from this whole thing, you're going to lose out on, think of all the family holidays, if they have children, all the things.
A little come to Jesus moment.
And she, bit the bullet and had us over for the nicest lunch. And if I would not have known this ahead of time, I would have never guessed it because she was nothing but kind and understanding. And, once you got to know Liz and Stacy, they weren't terrors.
They weren't unruly by any means.
They were two of the nicest little girls around.
Yeah.
So, she was, and from that, she and I became very good friends.
Yeah.
Because we were both teachers. We go over there for dinner.
Strong, independent, trailblazing in your own respect women.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah, so it was a friendship forever, and I really appreciated her. And every birthday of all 4 of you kids, remember those cakes that she would make?
She always made us a homemade cake.
Yeah, homemade, and it was fancy with the tears and the frosting and the flowers or the whatever. And she did that for Liz and Stacy, before you 2 ever showed up.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh my God, they had never had anything like that. Because my mom, was more relaxed about the whole deal, and it wasn't that big a thing. Well, she went all out, and oh man, she won them over like that. And
nothing like a
cake,
good cake to win a kid over.
Nothing
That's right.
like a yummy cake when you're a foodie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we got married, and fine dandy.
What happened with the broken engagement?
The broken engagement.
You said you were engaged before Dad.
Oh.
Do you want to share that? I don't know. I haven't heard this, so wait, was this the person that was in Alaska?
No.
Oh, okay.
That was a different guy.
Yeah. Well, see.
Yeah, see, there are a few guys out there.
Well, so then the best question is how did you end up choosing Dad over these other suitors? And you said it's because he was stable and, well established.
Right.
Was that really what ended up being kind of what, made that decision for you?
Yes. And I'm going to try and say this without tears.
Right.
I always say he didn't marry me, he rescued me.
I've never heard you say that ever.
Well, because I don't say it out loud,
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
So the thing that I always say, but only to myself.
Well, it's personal.
Yeah.
There, sweetheart.
Right. Even though you need it too, Mom.
No, I'm okay. Because that's the way I felt. Yes, he was stable, he was calm, he was lovable, but I felt rescued. Like a guy who could come and truly be helpful because he was established enough as he was and sure of himself enough as he was that there weren't other issues. The other men that wanted to marry me were not.
Yeah.
In one way or the other. And in fact, the whole moving to Alaska thing, I could not see that happening with my girls and as close as they were to my parents.
Yeah.
And then some of the others.
Taking my sisters away from my grandparents to move to Alaska.
Because they were just like this with them. And so, I had broken off a few of those things because I could see they really weren't in the best interest of all 3 of us.
Yeah.
And then.
Well, so I have heard definitely common theme throughout this that you really did make a number of decisions with my sisters in mind and how it would impact them, of course, and how it would be as you were a family unit, and all of that. And I do actually want to say that I know at some point you were living in a 1-bedroom trailer where they were in the bedroom, were they not? And you slept on the couch.
Right. So they could have a bedroom.
And you were on food stamps.
Yes.
And were you in school or working at that time? Was it the beginning of you working?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was doing both.
Both?
Yeah. And actually, we were in a 1-bedroom apartment before the trailer, and that was just a hoot. Yeah, boy, Stacy was really little then. But we lived below 3 college girls. And they had 3 boyfriends.
And they were the same age as you.
Pretty much.
Basically.
And we'd hear these boyfriends going up the stairs, and we got to know them. Mm-hmm. And they could smell me cooking down the apartment. So, of course, they were always, well, hi, Julie, what are you cooking? So I fed them off and on. But that was really, and it's another one of those things where, I was on food stamps. Welfare was paying the babysitting because I was teaching at the college then and stuff like that. But we had a great time. And the girls have nothing but happy memories about that.
Yeah.
Because those girls upstairs, the college girls, they were just a riot. Mm-hmm. We had a great time with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so I say that to kind of illustrate also how and why you could have felt that Dad was rescuing you in a way.
Right. And that was part
being
of
a
it
provider.
Too. Yes.
That's one thing that my dad has always done is been a provider.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes. And he was very generous.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, oh gosh, we won't ever have to worry about where money is going to come from ever again because this guy is
and luckily
stable.
Where it's going to go because it's not like he gambles or drinks or does anything
no
foolish.
The man's got no vices.
Yeah, foolish with except for I was going to say sugar, but
oh yeah, but that's cheap. You know, you can buy a
cheap.
5-pound bag and just pour it down his throat.
You can get a bag of donuts and it's fine. But then that makes me want to ask, do you remember, and again, you were a working mom of 2 and teaching chemistry, which for the record, a lot of nights you were preparing labs, you were grading papers. I remember you grading papers till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night and all Sunday afternoon. These were not multiple choice.
The AP homework was a nightmare, so that took me all Sunday to grade
This
that.
woman put in 80 hours of this teaching job.
Yeah.
And I say that to say, I don't know that you necessarily had the conscious thought or had time to have the conscious thought, but do you remember having any particular thoughts about wanting to do anything different as a parent or a mother for Alex and I, because we came so much later, than what you did for Liz and Stacy?
Well, Liz and Stace had to go to Kearney State College because that's all I could afford. And I didn't want to put the cost of their college education on to your father, And he appreciated that. And so what I wanted for you guys that they didn't have was more educational opportunities, because I think Stace got the best education for a teacher. She's a teacher at Kearney State. But Liz was in business, and she might have had more business connections and opportunities at UNL in Lincoln or UNO in Omaha or something like that. Mm-hmm. Now, it didn't end up hampering her any because she was hired as a middle-level accountant, I believe, for First National Bank right out of the box. Mm-hmm. But what I was happy about was that you were able to go to a school that better fit what you wanted to do, down at KU. Mm-hmm. And Alex in Lincoln better fit what he wanted to do because they had those exchange programs overseas and stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was the only thing, was that I wanted you guys to be afforded those opportunities.
Which we definitely were.
And you were.
Yeah.
And you took advantage of them, which, good. That was the point of that. Whereas the girls were restricted.
Yeah.
But luckily it didn't seem to hurt them any.
Yeah. Was there anything in the day-to-day, though, that you really thought of that you wanted to do differently, or?
That I did differently with you and Al than I did with Stace and Liz? Well,
I mean, again, you had the luxury of having a partner.
That's what I was
and
going to say.
And that, of course, there's going to be differences with that.
It was great. Yeah. I mean, that was what was better, was someone else shared the responsibility.
The burden of the kids.
Well, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but when Liz was about a year old, and I could only study after she went to bed. Mm-hmm. Well, that had me studying starting at about 8 or 9 at night. So I'd study into 1, 2 in the morning, doing chemistry and physics and math homework. And stuff. And I was tired. And one day she got up from a nap and she was crying. And, I thought, oh, honey, you haven't slept very long. Can't you lay back down? And, and I was trying to do other things, and I put off going in there because I just didn't want to deal with her. And I go in, and she's standing up in her crib and has the cord of the shade around her neck.
Oh, wow.
And had she fallen, she would have choked to death. And I remember, just that realization of, oh, you stupid idiot, this is not about you anymore. It doesn't matter whether you're, and that's the kind of thing that I never had to worry about with you guys, because, well, you know how active Dad was. I mean, and in fact, he took care of you for, remember, weeks and weeks.
Yeah. He was really kind of
I went back to teaching.
A full-time dad.
Yeah, he was.
In the winter when he wasn't farming and you were back in school teaching chemistry. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
It was.
And he took you to school and he picked you up
every day.
He stayed home with you a lot of times. And
yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
But that's how, it was better.
Yeah.
That from that perspective. But in terms of intentionally doing something different,
or like a lesson that you had learned. I mean that is a lesson.
Well, that's the lesson right there.
That's a lesson right there for sure. But that was learned very quickly and early on.
Yeah. Nothing comes to mind, really. I
was just curious.
No, nothing really comes to mind.
Yeah.
I don't think.
No, I was just curious. How do you feel like, can you reflect on what has made you most proud of your 4 kids?
That you all seem to be happily doing what you enjoy. That's really the main goal, of a parent, is that they want their child to be content.
Yeah.
And happy and where they should be in life, And I think literally all 4 of you are. And, considering, good grief, with COVID and with all that's gone on and the hirings and the firings and the instability and lots of things, that have happened in the last several years, it's somewhat miraculous. But again, I pray for you kids daily. Mm-hmm. And I truly think God just helps to keep you guys safe and stable and where you should be. And I have prayed regularly for your prosperity. And look what happened, You were able to find something to do that you just love.
Yeah.
And yeehaw.
Yeah, I think
I'm just proud, that you're all good workers and contributing, and that you seem to be good, kind people.
Yeah. I will say, I think one thing that I credit you with for sure is your independence, and then showing us 4 kids, we're all incredibly independent, through and through. And I think too that you have just really never tried to limit us in any way, you know, and my dad either. But I think that is truly one of the best things that a parent can do, is just really encourage their kids to do whatever they want and love and have a passion for.
Right.
And again, it was never an explicit, instruction by you guys.
We never said it.
But it really just was the freedom to be able to do it.
Right. And the opportunities that we made available to you so that you could pursue some things, and it's happened with all 4 of you kids that, every now and then we've had to help you a little, maybe financially. We'd had to help you a little, maybe with emotional support, help you a little here and there so that you could get to a place that you thought was better for you.
Yeah.
And it's worked.
Yeah. That's another thing, is you and Dad are extremely generous, and not just to your own children, but to all the randos you come across.
Yeah.
And
well, we've been blessed. We've been blessed with enough, capital that every now and then we can share some things. And I like to make quilts. So
you do like to make quilts. So you've literally made hundreds of quilts.
Yes, I have.
For your grandson and his entire class of first grade.
58. Yes. The
58
last year
for fifth grade.
Yeah. Last year was in elementary, and then I made some the years before that when they were little. And then the first batch I made was for you and the girls you graduated with. Remember your 12 friends?
Literally, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Those were the first ones I ever made.
Yeah.
And then I made them for my homeroom when I retired. Mm-hmm. That was really fun.
And the other thing that you do on a consistent basis is through, it's not through the church, but the information that that you learn about families, individuals, parents around Kearney.
Right, that have need.
And it can be literally anything under the sun. You have paid for an electric bill. Mm-hmm. You've bought children's clothing after a fire.
Yeah.
You have paid for some sort of certification, like a class certification.
Right, and car repair. And stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and these are all verified, folks that just can't quite qualify or have a tough time here or there. And, I think back to when my mom and dad helped me when I was on food stamps, and my church, they gave me a $450 loan to help. It was the down payment on that apartment when I had nothing. Mm-hmm. And they just gave that to me. And, I paid it back $25 a month. Mm-hmm. But, people helped me out, and it's only money.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say when you have enough you can share, and yet it's your father who pointed out, who made it aware, saying, in 10 years, is it really going to make a difference in your life if you gave these people $100, or if you gave these people $500, or 6 months from now, are you even going to know that and I went,
and it's true.
No.
Yeah.
No.
One thing two things we can credit Big T with is he always made sure his children could sleep and sleep in. And for that, I will forever be grateful, because when I hear about those parents that wake their kids up at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, thank God that was not my dad.
Nope.
Number one. And then a very close second is his generosity, actually. Yes. I would say his generosity is first, but that is one thing. He's always been so generous, and
he has.
His perspective on it is what has made us so generous as well.
Right. Well, he rescued me in more ways than one. Think of all the stuff I've learned from him. I mean, he calms me down. He helps me to see the perspective of the big picture a lot of times. You remember when I retired, and I was and I knew I needed to retire because I was too tired to do the job and be able to spend any time with Jonah on the weekends and stuff.
Your grandson, yes.
Yeah. And he said, Sweetums, that's what he calls me. Sweetums, there's a young person out there who would love to have your job.
And you've been hoarding it for 37
I
years.
hoarded it and I went, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's a young person who's going to get the best job in this school.
Yeah.
And of course,
you said, peace,
right.
I'm out of here.
Here's my letter.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, but
and on to
just
greener
stuff
pastures.
like that. He sees the big picture so well when sometimes, I focus in on the details because I'm a left brain detail person.
Yeah. And also, thank goodness, you are lighting a fire under his and all the rest of our butts to get stuff done. So Stace and I very affectionately refer to you as a bulldozer because you are running us all over.
Well, these piddlers, these people who piddle
and
instead
putter.
of, I am blessed to have two of them.
You are. Well, kind of like 2.5. I feel like
well,
Alex kind of counts.
No, it's Stacy.
Well,
Stacy's
but
the
Alex
P
kinda counts
diddler and
sometimes
you
too.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
In certain things.
Yeah, maybe so.
That's the other thing.
So I've got to get these people moving.